Okay, hi everybody. We're here live in the barn today answering questions that are sent in by you guys. Today, the question that I'm answering, I'm here by myself today, is how do stirrups affect equitation? So I'm going to show you a couple of things. If you have questions as we go along, whether you're watching live or you're watching the replay, you're more than welcome to leave your questions down below and I will circle back to those and make sure that those get answered. If you have a topic or a question for a future Facebook Live Q&A like this, you can go ahead and send that in to us wherever you're finding us, or at our email, which is hayescofelph@gmail.com. Okay, so I am more than happy to tell you about this, and this is a question that we get a lot. Usually it's when somebody's come and they're here for a lesson and maybe we've swapped saddles and they're riding in one of our saddles and suddenly they feel more comfortable. And so they're asking what the difference is there. The other time that I get this question is from people who are experiencing pain. Pain in the ankle, pain in the knee, pain in the hip, the lower back, and how they can alleviate some of that pain. So I want to talk to kind of both ends of those just a little bit and things that we can do to tweak the stirrups or kind of big changes that we can make if we need kind of a complete overhaul depending on what kind of saddle you're riding in. So the first thing that I want to show you is the difference between a pre-turned fender and a fender that is not pre-turned, because we can't very well talk about stirrups without first talking about the fender. And I'll show you here. I have two saddles here to show you. And this saddle here does not have a pre-turned fender. So this is what a lot of people are riding in. It just has a regular stirrup leather here. And this isn't a bad saddle. This is actually quite a good saddle. I've used this one for a long time in my lessons. But unfortunately, it does not have a pre-turned fender. So you can see how much leather there is in here, how much bulk, and just kind of how stiff this is here. And when it hangs, the stirrups and the fender are just hanging there, how it's hanging this way. So what that does is it means that it's harder to get your foot in when you're sitting in the saddle. It's harder to get your foot in. And then it also means that your foot and your ankle have to do that. You have to create that motion there, okay? Which isn't, it's not a ton of energy that I'm exerting to do that. I'm not going to get really tired doing that, but I am going to turn the camera. We got a little dog friend visiting us here. But I am going to notice, right, if the ankle is working here, then it's probably going to get sore after a little while. And where people are experiencing a lot of pain is usually because this is pulling the ankle in. Then there's a little bit of torque on the ankle, a little bit of torque on the knee, a little bit of torque on the hip, a little bit of torque on the lower back. So without the saddle being in the way a whole lot, it's actually creating quite a lot of resistance all the way up the body. Versus this saddle over here, let me show you this one. And this one has a pre-turned fender. Okay, so what that means, if you can see this here, is this part's all flat, but in here has actually been rolled and tied so that when the fender lies flat like that, the stirrup is sitting this way. So can you get both of those in one shot? See how this one is kind of hanging flat like this, and this one is sitting a little bit more like that. This one obviously gives you, it's a lot easier to get your foot in if you lose your stirrup while you're riding, but it also doesn't make you have to be pulling against your saddle. So your ankle can actually sit in this, where it's fairly relaxed. So I want to show you that. I want to show you what that looks like. So if I sit in this saddle, it's quite easy for me to get my feet in, right? It's pretty easy for me to grab my stirrups back. And then my ankles are relaxed. So my feet, if you look at my boots My boots are pretty flat. Okay, and then my ankle is relaxed. Like in here, my ankles can be very relaxed, which means that my knees are quite relaxed, which means that my hips can be relaxed. And that means that I can maintain the independence of the body with the rest of my body that I need to in order to communicate with my horse effectively. So if I am relaxed down here, then I have kind of complete authority over what I'm doing with my body, and I'm not having to work against tension in my ankle and holding my stirrups out. So if you just study for a second how comfortably my body sits here, you can see that my ankles are relaxed. I can wiggle my toes inside of my boots, which is always a good thing to check up on if you're tight in your ankles. I can wiggle my toes inside of my boots. Ankles are relaxed. My knees are relaxed. My hips are relaxed. Okay? Versus if I sit into this saddle, which like I said, this is a good saddle. It's a pretty well-made saddle. Fits a fair amount of horses. Has lasted a long time. But stirrups are a little harder to get into. Okay? And then can you see what's happening to my boots? See the wrinkle in my boots there? Okay, I'm either having to hold my ankle out like that so that my boot is actually making contact with the bottom of the stirrup, which I'll have to do if I'm trying to stand up in my stirrup, or if I hold my leg relaxed, then my feet are kind of just dangling around in my stirrup and I don't have the support of the bottom part of the stirrup. So what most people end up doing, because most people ride in a saddle like this, is they ride like this. Actually, I've got a Charlie horse just doing it. They ride like this, and they don't even really realize that they're holding their ankles tight and their heels down and their toes kind of to the outside. And can you see how that's actually taken my legs away from my horse's body? As opposed to when I was here in the other saddle and I still had my feet flat. When I push my feet flat in these, I actually have to take my feet away. And that's because now I've got tension in my ankle. Now I've got a little bit of tension in my knee. Now I've got tension up here in my hip as well. So anytime that I'm asking my horse to do something, and it's different for everybody, you could be, let's say you're having a hard time riding the lope comfortably. Well, if you've got tension in your ankles and tension in your knee, it's going to be really hard for you to loosen up your hip and be able to swing your hip nicely with the horse's motion. If you're working on your lead changes, then if you've got tension in your ankle and your feet are hanging off the horse's sides, that's going to create an issue. That's going to create kind of a surprise every time you bring your leg onto your horse. It's also going to make it really hard for you to stay giving the motion that you do want the horse to have with your hip, because you've got tension here, that's also here, that's also here, and it's kind of in the lower back as well. So if you want to try that, if you're watching this and you want to try that, you can, just as you're standing, try turning your toes in, right, so that they're on this angle. And right away, as soon as you start to do that, you'll see that your whole center of gravity changes. It's harder for you to balance. It's a bit uncomfortable. And you'll probably feel some of that tension already in the ankle, the knee, and in the hip. And those are things that we really want to try to eliminate as much as we possibly can. So pre-turn fenders are a super, super good idea. If you don't have them on your saddle, you can order pre-turn that are set to your leg length, which is really important as well. And you can add those on. I can do those for you if you want, or if you're not, local, you have somebody else that you trust, then you could get a quote for some of those. They're super, super easy to switch if you decide to go that route. The other thing you can do that a lot of people do is they will try to really spend a lot of time loosening up their existing fenders. So they'll crank their fenders around like this on both sides and stick a broom through there so that this leather kind of gets softened up. And that's a good option for making this a little bit looser, but it doesn't usually make the stirrup end up sitting this way. It's not quite as good an option as a pre-turned fender. Better than nothing, to get this softened up just a little bit, but it's not quite as good as that fender making that stirrup sit just flat. The other thing I want to touch on just briefly about fenders and how they affect your stirrups, which affects your equitation, is the length of them. So if you are riding in a fender that is too long for you, and let's say you are up at the top hole, okay, now you've got all of this leather that you're also fighting. So now you have even more leather to try to crank in. So that's why the length of the stirrup is so important, and making sure that you don't want to be riding up at the top. You don't want to be riding with your fender like that, because then you have all of that leather that your ankle is trying to fight while you're riding. Whereas if you are down here somewhere, at least there's a little bit less down here, right? So spending some time oiling that, spending some time with the broom through there, it'll help a little bit. It won't help as much as a pre-turned fender. The next thing that I want to show you is the stirrups and the difference between having flat bottom stirrup and like kind of a traditional stirrup. So this is what most people ride in. This is what we see most of the time. This one is just a leather wrapped stirrup. And if you can see that, they look pretty similar. When you're just looking at them, they actually look pretty similar. But this stirrup, for me at least, for somebody with smaller, narrower feet, doesn't offer enough space for my boot to fit in here so that my boot can sit flat. And that's really important. So in this stirrup, if I put my boot in there, I'm going to have contact over here, and I'm going to have contact over here, and I'm not actually going to have that surface area to push on when I need it. And what happens there is, again, that affects the ankle. Then the ankle is taking just a little bit of that torque that's in there from your foot not being flat. Or what a lot of people find is their foot ends up sitting more to the outside of the fender, and then the outside part of their foot gets really sore, even to the point where it gets bruised. So you want to make sure that you have a stirrup. It doesn't have to be this size. It could even technically be this size if you have really small, really narrow feet. But you want to make sure that you have a fender that offers enough space this way that your boot can sit flat in there. Okay? Again, as soon as you have any tension in your ankle, as soon as your body is trying to, work with something else, trying to push in here and trying to adjust the ankle so that the knee is still relaxed and the hip is still relaxed, anytime that you're trying to work against your tack, you're just making it hard for yourself, right? Tack is one of the few things that we can control when we're riding, and I think, it's hard enough as it is to develop the strength and the coordination and the balance and the flexibility to ride without having to fight against a stirrup or fight against a fender. So any of these things that we can do to make it a little bit easier is really important for us to do. So that covers the fenders, pre-turned and not pre-turned, too long, too short, or kind of the correct length. That covers the correct stirrup shape, I guess, of the tread of the bottom part. And then the other thing that we have to mention, because we're talking about stirrups, is making sure that you're riding in the right size in terms of like the actual width here. So, you know, we can say that it's not related to equitation, that this is just a safety thing, but I think everything comes back to equitation. If you stick your foot into a stirrup and it's a little bit tight, that's going to create a little bit of tension in your whole body, right? You're going to feel a little bit uneasy, and you should feel a little bit uneasy because you never want your foot to feel like it's touching on both sides or that you would have a hard time pulling it out. Super, super important that you can pull your foot out of the stirrup so that if you get into any kind of trouble, your foot is not hung up in there. So making sure that you have the right size where you've got enough space here for your foot to sit flat, and you've got a little bit of space on each side so that you can pull your foot out easily is really important. And then making sure that the stirrup isn't too big as well. So what can happen when a stirrup is too big is our foot can then slide right through. So these stirrups are stirrups that I've used for a really long time for my lessons, and these ones are probably, I would say probably once kids are about 10 or 11, they transition out of it, depending on the size of their feet and the length of their legs and, you know, what saddle this is on. But I don't like to have an adult in this size stirrup. This is too small a stirrup for most people, and yet this is the size stirrup that comes on a lot of saddles. I prefer to have an adult in a size like this. I don't prefer to have a child, you know, an 8 or 9-year-old or 7-year-old kid in a stirrup this big, because then there's the risk of the foot going all the way through. So those are a few things that you want to consider when you are thinking about your stirrups. We don't want pain, right? Eliminating pain is so important, because anytime that we have pain in the saddle ourselves and we have resistance in our body ourselves, that's going to translate to our horses. And the links between how we are feeling in our bodies and how the horse feels in their bodies are so significant that if you have resistance in your body on a specific day, I can almost guarantee that your horse is also going to have resistance in their body on that specific day. So really, really important. I know lots of you are managing pain, old injuries, just age, arthritis, you know, those kinds of things. And anything that we can do to make it more comfortable for ourselves, makes it more comfortable for our horses, allows us to be able to be in the saddle longer, is really important. Okay, I hope you have found this helpful. If there are any questions, then I would be happy to get back to you with those. You can just go ahead and drop those for me. If you're looking for any further information about how to work with us, you can do that on our website, which is hayescoastalperformancehorses.ca. We do have some clinics coming up. We have an online coaching program with loads of exercises. I do have an equitation program that I just offered for the very first time this year, and I will offer again in 2024. If you're interested in that, you can definitely reach out to me. And other than that, have a great week, and we will see you back next week. Thanks.